Hi there, welcome to this recording of the Social Research Association's event Roots into Research. This event took place in November 2023 in Leeds, and we wanted to record it to share more widely the amazing discussions that we had on the night. So the Social Research Association, if people aren't aware, is a professional body for social researchers that aims to provide networking events, trading, information, and a whole host of other things for social researchers across the UK. The Social Research Association North is a regional group that really aims to highlight the vibrancy of the research community in the North and also put on regional events, opportunities for people who are based in that region. So this event, Roots into Research, really wanted to delve into the different pathways that you can take into research careers. We found from feedback and our own experiences that it's not always clear how you actually get a research career and also the different options that are available to you. So we have 5 different speakers who are sharing their insights of their sometimes meandering careers into social research. They are going to share the different types of research you can do. So we've got government social research, we've got charity, we've got academia, and we've got agency side research. So really a full spread of what you can do. And our 5 speakers, as I introduce them, are Amelia Clayton from the Young Foundation, Olivia Brown from HMRC, we've got Simon Maydew from Varian, we've got Skye Curtis from MEL Research, and Peter Traynor from Youth Futures Foundation. Without further ado, please enjoy this event.
So for those who don't know, Rishi Sunak, he devised this idea in the middle of the pandemic that for those who were at risk of long-term unemployment and who were in universal credit, he would give them a placement. And so multiple organisations across the country partnered up, got funding from the government and offered, these places out to people under 25. So I was looking, I applied to loads of them, and there was one. I was like, I want that one, because it was a research job. I was like, that's mine. So I applied to it. I got it. So I started the Kickstart scheme May 2021. Once again, online, still the middle of a pandemic. Kind of a nightmare. So I was meeting all these people online. Not a great place to start your career, but it was great in the sense that I had a foot in. And the company I worked for, the Young Foundation, were brilliant. They had a very great approach to research, which really aligned with my own views on research. So I was hired as a peer researcher. For those who don't know, peer research is where you are sort of hired by a researcher and you are a part of the community that they're wanting to look into. So a few examples, we did mini projects, one on LGBTQ plus young people's experiences in the workplace. So a bunch of us being LGBTQ, we directly had connections to people in that community, and we could understand some of the language that they said, and we could understand their feelings on a level which is a bit deeper than someone who isn't a part of that community. And it really gave the depth to that research. We also did another piece of research on fat phobia in young people, which we were greatly allowed to name the fat report, which it wasn't that fat, it was quite thin, but it was there. And, it was something I was quite proud about, because I was like, that's me on there, that's my work, and that's linked to me. And then end of 2021, we finished. And I was like, I'm back out there, no job. Have some experience, but nothing there. And it wasn't great for a few months. End of the year, it's Christmas period. There's not really that many jobs going. It was like, ugh. And then the Young Foundation reached out and they had an internal application going for the research officer. So the research officer role, I started in January 2022. And this was quite an entry-level role, and it was directly working as a researcher. I was going out, I was interviewing, I was working with communities. It was work from home, so being in Bradford, that was wonderful for me, because the commute to London is awful, and the prices in London are extremely high. So I was very lucky that I was given the privilege to do that and work from home and still be involved in a company which is so wonderful and involved with communities. And I've had the privilege of working with some absolutely incredible people throughout my time. So I've been in this position nearly 2 years. And I've worked with, I've worked with migrants. I've worked with people looking for jobs who are part of Universal Credit. I've had the privilege of looking into food in Birmingham. So sort of what I do in a day, I guess. So research officer is quite a broad title. We kind of do a lot within the company. So we work primarily in peer research. So, we hire and manage peer researchers who are directly involved in the communities we're looking into. We train them on how to interview people or how to run surveys. We train them on how to analyse data, and we just oversee that they're doing everything ethically and making sure they don't, run out and start asking really awful questions to people. We also recruit a lot of the time. So we recruit the peer researchers, but we are also involved with sort of navigating the barriers that are involved with recruitment. So like, how do we make sure certain groups are definitely getting these adverts? How do we make sure that, people who we want to target are not just glancing at this and moving on? We create the media assets. We create the forms, which are the sign-up forms for them. We manage them. We also schedule and conduct, once again, the interviews. So we interview peer researchers, but we also do regular interviews, directly with the people we're trying to reach out to and contact in research and stuff. We analyse a lot of data. I probably spend most of the time looking at data and working out what the story is from that. We do a lot of client management. So a lot of the time I am in meetings with those who have hired me for projects. And we do a lot of report writing. So in my time there, I've managed to write 3 different pieces in the company. And I'm also currently working on some other pieces. So as I mentioned earlier, we've worked with migrants who are at risk of labour exploitation within London. That resulted in the Mayor of London giving a massive grant towards supporting migrants. We worked on a project called No Wrong Door, where we spoke to employment specialists, but also those who were seeking employment. And we also looked into food systems within East Birmingham and sort of how healthy food is inaccessible to a lot of people. And a lot of these pieces, some are grand, some are quite small, but they've all had direct impact, and we can see the effects of them, and we're still working within these communities now to sort of build and support the work we've done. So we're not just stepping out and going, we've done the research, bye everyone. We're keeping with them. So if I was to give you any advice, I think number 1, don't start looking for work in the middle of a pandemic. Probably not the wisest thing to do. 2, have a passion within research. Sort of, if you are wanting to become a researcher, you can't just sort of going, I want to speak to people. You need to have that sort of drive, because you do encounter a lot of barriers in research and you need to be able to push through those. And passion is the big thing for that. You need to be open to different research methods. So when I started, I had no idea what peer research was. I was just like, interviews, surveys, cool. Peer research is great. Would advise people looking into it, but also just have a look at creative methods, focus groups, anything that's different to what you're being taught, because those skills are really useful and it shows that you're willing to go that extra step. And it always looks great on a CV. Look for apprenticeships. A short-term role has the possibility of leading to a longer role. I had that privilege, and it was a great way for me to, one, get that learning in for those 6 months, but to get me in that longer-term role. And just try to make the best of something negative. So, if you are struggling at the moment, try to look at the positives. Don't let that negative situation drag you down and prevent you from going out there and flourishing. It's not always the easiest getting into research, especially if you don't know the avenues. But it's always a good thing to sort of push through, have that determination, don't let the negative drag you down, I guess. And then just in general, research and researchers, we are friendly. I was terrified of reaching out to people when I started. I had no idea that people were really excited to speak to me and answer my questions. So like, go on LinkedIn. If you find, someone from a company you're interested in, message them, ask them a question, ask them how they got there. We are happy to answer. We're not a scary bunch of people who sit in the background like conniving in the dark. We want to answer your questions. So just reach out. Like, we will answer you. And I think that's the big one is, reach out, be open, start asking people, create networks. They will benefit you, even if they're not benefiting you right now. In the future, they will. And be passionate. Have a passion, because you kind of do need it in research. But yeah, that is me. So thank you guys for listening. I am going to pass on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, so my slides aren't as snazzy as Amelia's, but hopefully I don't probably need to tell you what HMRC does either. But what you might be surprised is actually within government, there are social researchers, and there's quite a big community of social researchers who are collecting evidence and collecting an understanding of what the public kind of need and value and want, and feeding into decision making and kind of behind the scenes. So in terms of my routes into research, I'll start at university, where I studied psychology at the University of Manchester. And I kind of had a challenge where I was overwhelmed I didn't know what I wanted to do after university. I liked all elements of psychology, kind of like the educational side, the clinical side, organizational psychology side, etc. And I just kind of thought there's so many doors that I could go into my career. I just have no idea, which route to follow, because there's this kind of assumption in psychology where if you commit to one path, like studying to become an educational psychologist, for example, you commit to that path for however many years and kind of that's your specialism. And I knew that from what I wanted was a bit more of a variety. I liked all those different topic areas, and I wanted kind of a job that would allow me to tap into those different areas of interest and passion, like Amelia was saying. So for me, I just was a bit overwhelmed. I had no idea what to do. I was just kind of plodding along in my university course, and there was the opportunity to do a placement year. And I thought, actually, that's a really good opportunity to explore different careers paths, maybe be in the workplace for a year, and kind of I'd see if that gives me a bit more of insight into what I wanted to do or not, what I liked about that particular workplace or not. I applied for a couple of different placements, all very different. I applied to one because I'm Manchester based at Salford Royal Hospital, which was kind of in the neuroscience ward, helping people recover from kind of brain injuries like strokes. And then I also applied for a government social research placement, which, because of the timings, I had to respond to the government social research one before I could kind of go for the application process from some of the others I'd applied. And it quite intrigued me. I didn't know, kind of like Georgina said at the start, that you could do research outside of an academic context. I was familiar, my lecturers did research on the side. I wasn't sure. I just didn't know that there were other opportunities. I guess that's really why an event like this is important. So I saw this government social research placement come up. I applied for that and got it. So I did my year in HMRC, because you get randomly allocated, and HMRC probably wasn't on my list of my preferences at the start. But actually, I'm really glad I was allocated there, because it kind of opened up my whole world. HMRC is a really big department, and there's a really big social research community. So I was able to learn so much about kind of different people's career paths and routes and how they got into research. So networking and playing on that is really important. My placement year kind of went by. I was really enjoying it. I quite liked the structure and the fact that we kind of, in this particular role, I was working in benefits and credits research. That's interacting understanding the needs of people who kind of receive benefits, and understanding their experiences and feeding that into decision making. And I thought, actually, I quite like this. I quite like the fact that my work has impact, and I feel quite close to the decision makers. So get to just kind of, my stakeholders are people in the department who make decisions. So I feel really close to the impact. And also during my placement year, I found that in this kind of government context, it's kind of encouraged to kind of move between teams, move between government departments to kind of get a variation in experience. So it kind of ticked all the boxes for me in terms of what I wanted from a career. I wanted to have variety and have value. So I had the opportunity to actually come back. So part of my placement, I was able to sit an interview in an assessment centre and come back to the department. And if there's any questions as well at the end or in the networking about application processes, I can absolutely give my advice, because civil service interviews are quite structured. But yeah, I returned to the department, and in that space of time whilst I was finishing off my final year of university, that's when COVID happened. So when I came back, I was allocated back to a team that was working on an evaluation of the COVID scheme. So that's the job retention scheme and the self-employed income support scheme, which were administered and delivered by HMRC. It was really interesting to work on evaluation. It kind of, you're conducting research to understand, is a policy effective? Is it doing what we thought it would do when we implemented it? And it kind of keeps governments accountable, for the kind of policies that they implement. And it's becoming a real popular kind of approach to research in government. It's all about evaluation, and can you prove that a policy is working or not, so we can spend our money in the best places. So again, really like this research. It was very topical, felt really valuable and important. But what I quite liked was I got the opportunity to do some in-house research. So by that, I mean, in a general context in government, you'd work with a research agency to deliver research on a kind of a large scale that you wouldn't be able to do yourself. But what I quite liked was an opportunity I had to do a smaller scale research project, where I got to speak to kind of individuals myself and manage the research. And I was looking for opportunities, kind of following where my enjoyment was in my role. Can I have opportunities to do more of that? As I said, it's quite encouraged to move between roles. So I saw what's called an expression of interest. These get emailed around quite a lot in the department, and they are kind of informal applications to say, we need to fill this role temporarily. Would you like to fill it? So I actually moved teams in HMRC again. This will be my third role in the department, which is where I am now. I managed to get the permanent position. And in this team, I've absolutely loved it. We do kind of research ourselves. My day-to-day is things like kind of project management, working with stakeholders in HMRC to figure out what's their research need, what kind of answers are they trying to understand, what kind of people that their policies affect are they trying to get to know better, to inform their decisions. And then I work with them to design a research project to suit their needs. That can look really different depending on what it is that they're looking for. And then I get to actually speak to people myself. So in the department, kind of everyone interacts with HMRC at some point in their lives. So the pool for people that kind of, and the variety of work available is really broad, and I quite liked that. So yeah, that's kind of the team I'm in now, which I'm really enjoying. But then for the future, I think what's quite good about a career in government social research is it's quite structured, and there's kind of clear progression, and there's also a technical framework that you can look up online, and that basically has kind of against each grade, what are the skills of a social researcher that government is looking for. And so for me, I quite like the opportunity, that encouragement to constantly be learning and developing against these kind of technical skills. And for me, kind of the next step is, I think I'd like to get experience of a different department, just to kind of get that variety again in roles and be able to maybe come back to do some more evaluation research. So I really liked the impact that had. In terms of kind of tips and things about maybe a career in social research and government, I would just say, I think every year there's kind of mainstream applications, and there's lots of resources online about the application process. It's quite structured, as I said. So if you have any specific questions, I can help to answer. But it's all about kind of just applying and kind of going for that opportunity and being really specific about your experience. They love kind of specific examples that you can talk about in terms of your experience or interests and how you want to have impact in the community. But yeah, so that's everything. And as I said, happy to answer any questions at the end.
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me today in terms of talking through the routes into research. My name is Maydew. I'm a director at Varium, formerly known as Kantar Public, one of the largest social research agencies in the world. And in this 10-minute slot, I'm going to talk through the from a social research perspective rather than actually marketing or consumer research. So, whilst I was reflecting on these topics into research, I framed my short presentation to 5 themes, really. So that's in terms of purpose, well, why do I do the things that I do, through to my story, what's on my desk in terms of the job I actually do at this moment in time. And then I'll talk through in terms of what those sorts of routes and options and possibilities are in terms of social research. So I think understanding your purpose and why you do the things you do is a powerful way of articulating what you're really about. It's actually not defined by your job or your role you do. It's much more than that. So for me, my purpose is very much grounded in the belief that I want to create a better future and I want to give people a voice. And that's the reason why I do the things that I do. So fundamentally, that's what I'm striving to achieve in terms of every aspect of my life and in terms of the work that I do. I wish I could say that I came up with that sort of strapline 20, 30 years ago. I didn't. It took decades to actually curate what am I about and what I actually do. I think what I used to say, if people used to say, what do you do? I used to say I was a researcher, but now I actually talk about that higher purpose, about what I'm trying to achieve and what I'm trying to do. And I think social research is really the tool to achieve that vision, that belief, what you want to actually do. And I think that's a really, really important way to look at research, not just simply from doing research for research's sake, but in terms of how it makes a bigger impact on society, and your role within that is really, really important. So through social research, we're very much about, from my perspective, amplifying voices. So it's giving people a voice, particularly those vulnerable in society as well, who don't have that voice. So important that we give them the opportunity to express their views and opinions about the services, their lives, etc. And that helps to shape services and policies. And my company itself is very much about powering decisions that shape the world. So it's all about making an impact. So what's my story? Well, first of all, I should say this is that I've been incredibly privileged in terms of the job and career that I've had, that it's actually not been a job. It's actually been a hobby and a passion of mine. So I've never thought of it as actually I'm earning a wage to just to do a job. So I'm really, really lucky that I've been able to do that for 20 or 30 years. I know some of you around the room are thinking I may have only been doing this for 10 years. But yes, I have been doing it for a long, long time, and I've still got that, that drive and that passion in terms of what I do. So there's a selection of pictures here, and just in terms of that symbolize parts of my career path. So I'll guide you through what I've been doing over those decades. So I started off at Lancaster University, did a geography degree, and that's where I really got into research, into doing surveys, and like a typical geographer, I'd be knocking on people's doors on some floodplain in terms of what they thought of flooding and the incidence of flooding and all these sorts of things. So I did things like that, and I looked at noise pollution, and once somebody had this great idea on an Isle of Man field trip, is that they thought there was an association and a connection between the price of a pint of beer and where the pub was located. So their hypothesis is that, if you lived in an affluent area, the price of beer would be higher. And that was a very interesting project that we did. At least the field work was good. But that's where I started from in terms of getting that feel about doing research and engaging with people. So then I first job was at Staffordshire County Council. So when I joined that job, it was actually in a recession, and I come from North Staffordshire. I come from a coalfields communities. It was the end of the Thatcher Conservative government. There were lots of cutbacks in terms of pits and things along those lines. And so my first job was very much in terms of providing an evidence base to demonstrate the impact those cuts would have on society in terms of communities. And so from that, I learned very, very quickly the power of actually doing research is that it wasn't research for research's sake. It's actually the evidence you were collecting and the strength of the evidence you provided meant that you could bid effectively against other locations to get money for those communities that you actually cared about and actually lived in, from my perspective. So you could see the real impact of research in terms of making a difference on communities. So I spent a couple of years at County Council, then I moved into the training and enterprise field, which is very much looking at lifelong learning and research there to actually encourage people to take up lifelong learning, and that had been a gateway in terms of moving their moving forwards in terms of their lives and in terms of moving their careers forwards, etc. Before, all those roles were very much client side, and then I worked for an agency side. So I moved to a company based in Birmingham called BMG Research. And the work there I very much did was on the top left-hand side, which is very much around housing, regeneration, communities, health and well-being projects, etc. And from there, I started off as a research manager, and then I climbed the ladder, so to speak, and became a research director. And there was a board director at that, and also became board director of Wolverhampton Homes as well. So that career path is a career path that you could go on as well. So the initial starting points in research is very much you learning your craft. You're learning about qualitative research, quantitative research, how to do focus groups, all those sorts of skills, etc. But then you move towards managing people or leading people or business development or sales of research. So it's not just necessarily, dealing with numbers and things like that. So it's much, research can be much wider, I suppose. That's what I'm trying to get across in terms of the impact. It's not just about doing surveys or doing focus groups. It's about, you can have an impact on people's lives and the companies that you live. You can affect their career prospects. You can give them opportunities as you move up towards that ladder. Then I moved to MEL Research, where Skye's going to come on a little bit later on. And they have very, very strong social purpose, and very proud of the things that we did there in terms of, again, research, but donating 5% of net profits from the research we do to local charities and communities. So again, it's demonstrating that you can go beyond simply doing research and presenting reports and so on and so forth. And now I'm at Varian as a director. So what's on my desk at Varian? Very much, a lot of the work that I do is evidence-based research. So it's about shaping government policy. I work with HMRC, Home Office, Department of Business and Trade, and Department of Levelling Up. And I'm doing a whole raft of different sorts of projects. So some of it could be around, for a DBT, like the National Survey Register of Businesses, which is around exporting behaviours, and particularly around Brexit and the free trade agreements. And we're providing insights and evidence to which to help that department understand what's going on in terms of the business community. But I do a lot of work also with the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. That is a mouthful. Better just say DLUC. But, so I do a lot of work in there particularly around communities or housing sort of issues. So I'm doing work on the social residence survey, which is like a 4,000 interviews across England, trying to understand what are tenants' views on the services that received. You would have seen lots of press recently about things like that, about damp and mould, and are they getting the service they need from their landlords? So I'm providing evidence in there. I'm doing work with the private rented sector. We're doing stuff on mediation in terms of where a tenant might have a dispute with a landlord provider and how you can actually overbridge that. This morning I was doing a presentation to look on the capacity within local government in terms of the skills and capabilities that they've got. So there's a big portfolio of different types of projects there that we're working on at any one moment in time, and there's more than that as well. So routes and options. It's already been actually alluded to in some of the earlier presentations. But there's lots of rich and exciting possibilities in terms of social research. The amount of sectors you can get involved in is enormous. You can deal with housing, health, communities, employee experience, transport, environmental's really big topic at the moment, obviously, with climate change. So lots and lots of different sorts of areas that you can get involved in. You can either specialise, or you could try getting a dabbling in all these sorts of sectors, which is a good thing to do. There's also a diversity of roles as well. So you could be doing something about behavioural. So it's about how do you change people's behaviours and nudging in terms of the change what they do, which has an impact, positive impact on society. So what sorts of motivations do you need to influence to actually for members of the public to change their behaviour, to have a positive benefit? You can do things that were very data analytics, lots of spreadsheets, SPSS, all those sorts of things. Not for me, but you can do that. Project management, you could be operational in terms of collecting the data itself, like telephone interviews or face-to-face, managing that. Can be client services, that's working with your clients and government departments in terms of managing those jobs. Or it could be business development, so you're actually winning the work yourselves. You write proposals and securing the work for your company. So if you're in a private agency, so there's lots of different sorts of roles, and they all have different skills, different attributes that you can draw upon, and lots of different sorts of employers as well. So charities, universities, government agency side that you can apply to. So it's a big sector actually, in one respect, but a small sector in another way, because a lot of people tend to know themselves, know each other. So my advice would be to, be curious, experiment, find what your interest is, and don't be afraid to fail. If that doesn't work, go try something else. There's a big world of opportunities out there that you could that you can engage with, and yes, it is a world of possibilities, really. You could work on the client side, which is what I started off, or on the agency or market research side. There's a big demand for skills there, particularly in terms of evaluation skills. There's skills shortages within the civil service in these sorts of areas. People are crying out in terms of, a younger generation of people coming through into the sector is really, really important. You've got big research agencies, so like where I come from, so we have graduate research programs that you can apply to get in. We have ours, I think, in January next year. Ipsos Mori do the same sorts of things as well. But there's lots of strengths in independent research agencies as well, smaller agencies. So we've got some good agencies here. Manchester, you've got GGS Research, QA Research within York, MEL, Birmingham, BMG. There's lots, you can look them up, but lots and lots of agencies where you can get that experience. And sometimes smaller agencies, you're closer to the action, so to speak. So you can learn and pick up more skills in different sorts of areas that can help you in your career. So you've just got to really experiment, dip your toe in the water and see what floats your boat. Really, that's what you've got to do. And whether you're going to be a specialist or a generalist is important as well. So, do you want to do lots of different sorts of research, or do you want to really dive down into the detail on something? So, lots of broader points there to think about. I would just say is that just be bold, just dream big, have a plan, and to action it. And then finally, just a few quotes there, but it's really Nelson Mandela. It's in your hands to make a better world for all who live in it. Fundamentally, I see social research and a career in social research can play a fundamental part in achieving that goal. So believe in yourself, believe in making an impact, and believe in making an impact on the communities and society in which you live. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Skye. I'm the person from MEL Research. So thank you as well for giving us such a nice introduction. But before I talk about MEL, I'm going to start from the beginning. And you might see some similarities, I think, actually, in some of the reasons we came into research, which is, I think research is a really important part of that solving problems. And that's why I wanted to do it. I'm similar to some other people, growing up, come from poor background, first to go to university in a kind of forgotten part of Eastern England where no one can travel to because the trains and the roads are terrible. So, but I knew that was wrong. I knew something was wrong with that system, and I knew that I wanted to change it. I didn't quite know how to do that. So, again, I didn't have any access to anyone who'd been to university. There wasn't many people in my community. There was no one in my community, realistically, that had been to university. Not many people were thinking about it. But what I did know is that politics was supposed to be part of that. So that's what I did at university. I did international relations and politics. And when I was there, realised I loved the research. Yes, I liked reading it, but I wanted to do it. So I did my master's using research methods. And that's when I kind of thought, right, well, how do I go about doing this? Being a typical politics grad, I went into policy because, again, I didn't know much about the research sector. Absolutely had no idea what evaluation is, which is what I do now, and still didn't know for many years into working, actually, which I think is quite common. But what I did understand is that I wanted to, again, be part of that problem-solving community. So I went into policy and I did a graduate scheme at Cancer Research UK doing policy, information and communications. And actually, I loved that. I kind of knew, to be honest, quite early on, I didn't want to do policy. But what I did like about it is that it gave me really broad range of skills in like communications, influencing, project management, which all came in really good stead because I think it's probably why I have my head role that I have now. But what I did realize again is that it just wasn't close enough to doing the research for me. I think policy is really important and really influential, but often it's very long term. You don't expect a policy necessarily to have impact for many years. And if it does, you can't necessarily see it. And I think I just wanted to be a bit more action focused. And so started to scope around and decided maybe I need to do project management. So as was introduced, one of the kind of roles within research is a project management role. So after I finished the graduate scheme, I stayed at Cancer Research UK and went into program management of a big international research project, which was across 5 or 6 different LMIC countries. It was quite exciting because they hadn't done anything like that at Cancer Research UK, hence the name, before, but they were deciding they wanted to share some knowledge and experience internationally. And that was really great. Got to work with a lot of academics, top of their field across the world, a lot of project management, program management, got to experience the importance of culture and knowing about culture and understanding that how we do things in the UK is not how it needs to be done and isn't how it's done everywhere as well, which I think is in this modern world really important to recognise. But I really missed the research. So while I was doing that job, I went back to do my master's in social policy research, which I definitely wouldn't have chosen to do. If I was an undergrad, I would have picked something which sounded a bit sexier probably, to be honest. But I knew that what I needed was those hands-on research skills. And I chose my master's because it was methods focused. I wanted to know, like, how do you do good qualitative participatory research? How do you engage people? What does good ethics look like in research? And that's when I kind of moved over to the standard research roles. I think most of you will kind of be thinking about first one being in an agency as a research manager. So I think one thing to be aware of agencies is there are quite different levels, and your role will look very different depending on the level you were at. So in that research manager role, I was kind of the main research function, me amongst many others. So going out, speaking to people in the communities, a lot of field work, designing the surveys, writing up the reporting, doing the analysis. So really doing the research. And that's when I fell into evaluation. So my role there covered social policy and evaluation, and I loved evaluations. And so if you don't know what they are, that's fine. Most people don't. I guess I can give you an example. If you wanted to, there's lots of research that we know that there's inequalities and inequities in the world. So often governments or funders will want to do something about that. So they might say, well, we know that there isn't equal outcomes in the education system, so let's improve the history education system and see if it works. But how do you know it works? And that's when evaluation comes in. So they try to understand if it works, who it works for, how it could be improved. So it's very practical. And I really enjoyed that because I could see the outcome. And actually, one thing I like about evaluation is it is as much about the communities as it is about the people funding it. And I think that's probably a change. I think when I started in evaluation, it was about the funder. So it was like, is this effective for them? Is it effective for their purse, basically? I think hopefully now we're moving to a space where it's a bit more about, is it working for people in the community? Is this right for them? What do they think about it? What are their perspectives on what this should look like? So I really loved that connection to the community. And so I did that for a bit. But I think working in an agency, it was very fast paced. And I learned probably more than I had in any other job because it was so fast paced, and there's just lots of skills that you pick up, a lot of experts, which was really, I was very grateful to be around. But at the same time, I think obviously you're commissioned to do a job, and often you do just finish and leave. And I felt like, you kind of give recommendations, but you often didn't have the opportunity to know what happened afterwards, to kind of implement it, to kind of be a part of that stakeholder relationship. So that's when I decided to go back in-house in charity, because that's where I spent most of my career. So I went to work at Citizens Advice, which you may know of. It's a kind of large national charity, about 250 local offices, and they give advice on anything, basically. So I went there to work as an evaluator, started out as an analyst, left as the manager. So hopefully I was doing something right, because I got promoted a few times while I was there. And I loved working there because the variety was amazing. And I think the good thing about being the charity that's delivering is that you're very close to operations. You're very close to what's happening on the ground. And obviously we had the financial crisis, we had furlough, we had pandemic. There was other things that happened, but it's been so hectic, I can't actually remember, but I'm pretty sure there's another crisis that happened before that as well. And at each turn, Citizens Advice is giving advice on that topic. So it meant that we were always reacting to what was happening. We had great data on like what was going on in people's lives. What does it mean to have a pandemic? What does it mean for people's lives? And we had a lot of access to that information. So I really, really loved it there. But then went into the management role, as I mentioned, and that is a difference. That's a step, that's a change. So I think before I was a manager, I was doing a lot of the research, I was designing the research, I was kind of going out doing the field work, doing the analysis, doing the reporting, speaking to stakeholders. And then I started to be a manager, and a lot of my role was management, unsurprisingly. So it was quite a difference, I think. So it's just something I think a lot of researchers come to in some point in their career is, I'm a senior researcher now. Do I want to be a manager? Because it does look a bit different, I would say. So I did do a lot of design work as a manager there. But it was a lot more about engaging with a broader organisation, thinking about what does evaluation look like here? How do we make evaluation good here? How do we kind of connect it to strategy? Make sure that we're really we have a good research practice. So it was a lot of meetings and a lot of speaking to people, budget management, team management, one-to-ones. So it was quite different, I would say, to my day-to-day as a researcher. But I enjoyed it, and I'll bring it back to my first roles because I liked project management as well, and it connects the both. It was probably why I kind of felt able to step into that role, because I had that background in quite a diverse area, which was really, really helpful. And then after being there for about 5 years, I decided that it was time for a change. So I went back to agency world, now work as head of evaluation at MEL Research, which I love working there. I'm going to be honest, I didn't think I was going to go back into agency, but the reason I did was because they have such a strong social purpose. And I think the great thing about agency work is you can be really creative because you don't have so many blockers, you don't have so many kind of bureaucracy, I guess, and you can be very quick and reactive. And there's a real strong emphasis on design and creativity because when people commission research, a lot of organizations now have their own research team. Like at Citizens Advice, we had an evaluation team of 10. So we're doing a lot of the research ourselves. So when we commission, we want specialists. We want people who are going to give us something new. And I think that's a good thing for agency because it means you're always kind of looking for new methods, for creative methods. Evaluation is in a really exciting space. There's a lot of change. So if you like a research or a work where you're going to be constantly learning, then work in social research, because the methods that I use now, I did not know existed 3 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. I think it's a really interesting place. And it's only going to get more interesting with AI as well and how that's going to have an impact on research. So I really love working there. As I said, my role is a management role. So I do more research now. I do a lot of design of research and a lot of strategizing about evaluation, what it will look like in the future. How do we, for instance, embed EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion? What does that look like in practice? How do we kind of support our clients as well on that journey? So I really value that experience. Just kind of some tips and advice then before I head off. A lot of them have been covered. I think be open to learning. Just because you finish your degree doesn't mean you'll stop learning. You'll probably learn, I think, even more stuff when you graduate and you start picking up the job because it's just ever changing, which I think is probably a good thing. Be inquisitive. I think if you want to be a researcher, you have to be inquisitive because you don't know the answer a lot of the time. You don't know the answer to how you're going to get these people to participate in the research, how you're going to ask these questions, how you're going to do this, how you're going to put the reports together, or, what questions are important to ask. There's a lot of kind of ifs and buts in there. It's not always a simple picture. But if you like to solve problems, it's a great place to work because you'll always be solving problems. And then I think quite a lot of this has been covered. So reach out to people on LinkedIn. There's a lot of us on LinkedIn. We're not scary just because we work and we look like big older adults. I think reach out and speak to people. The worst thing's going to happen is they're not going to respond. And it's not really that big a deal at all. So I think do ask people about their careers and their jobs. Most people are really happy to talk about that in a way, I would say. Don't be afraid to change. I think you don't have to know what you want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know it was possible to do what I wanted to do. So I think just try something. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You can change. And that is the benefit of this modern workforce. It is quite transitionary. There's a lot of change and that's fine. I don't think people see that as a bad thing anymore. I think people embrace a diverse kind of career background because you just bring newness. I know from managing teams that the best teams are the diverse teams. And that brings me to my last point, which is just be yourself. And I say that is a really important point because the research space is not as diverse as it should be in any way. And I think it's such an important field for having diverse thoughts. We need to have people that have different opinions, different perspectives, because there's a value and there's a decision making that happens when we choose what methods to use, who to do research with, what questions we're going to ask. And that's where having diversity is really important. I think hopefully we're in a better place now where people and organizations are really embracing diversity, but definitely don't be afraid to kind of have your own perspective, bring a full self to work. I don't think that just because there might be a hierarchy in a team, that it means that people don't have equal value in bringing their new ideas to the space. And that's the value of research. A lot of it is about ideas. So yeah, I think that's me. If you've got any questions about agency or charity work after, happy to answer.
I'm just going to talk a bit about my meandering career in research. some of the mistakes and pitfalls that I've encountered, I think be really useful to reflect on. There'll be kind of two parts to the presentation. First, I'll just talk a bit about myself, which is quite nice because as a researcher, I spend a lot of time listening to other people. I don't get much time to talk about myself, so I'm going to take this opportunity. And then I'm just going to reflect on some of my experiences, and hopefully they'll be useful for some of the people in this room. Let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough. Can everyone hear me at the back? Great, okay. Okay, just the present. So I'm currently research manager at Youth Futures Foundation, which is actually just one of the best jobs in the world. And I really love it. And it's a great bunch of people to work with, really interesting work. I manage a very broad portfolio of research. The aim of the organisation is to improve employment outcomes for young people from minoritised communities. And my role in the research team is to help in the curation of research, really expand the knowledge base around interventions, what works, what doesn't work. We're part of a broader team that includes a lot of evaluation and is in the middle of kind of piloting really interesting evaluations. And I'll talk a little bit. Seems like, and as I will say, evaluation is having a bit of a moment at the moment. And it's really something that everyone here, I think, should think about because it's a really exciting space. I'm also managing editor of the Journal of Probation, which was something I started during COVID. And it's really relatively light touch, and they let me carry on doing it alongside my full-time job. And it kind of keeps me in touch with academia a little bit. So this is a kind of my career overview. I think we've had a few kind of meanders already today. So I left school really with, like many people, without a clue as to what I was going to do. But I had a sense there was kind of something not quite right about the world, and I really wanted to try and do something about that. I grew up in a very small town in the northeast of England. Nobody had a clue about university. And even when I go home today, people will say to me, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a researcher." And they'll say, "So what do you do?" And I'll tell them a bit about what I do. And then they'll say, "So what do you do?" And then they'll say, are you ever going to get a proper job? And I'm like, well, it kind of feels like a proper job to me anyway. So I kind of like tried various different things, training, jobs. I was a door-to-door salesman for a while. I worked a milk round. But whenever I went to the careers office, they gave me this questionnaire, and it said I should be a researcher based on my own kind of like characteristics. But I had no idea what research was, really. So I trained as a chef, and I worked in catering for a couple of years. But when I was training in catering, I trained at Teesside University, and we used to prepare food for the academics. And I used to see all of the academics going to behind these screens, and we'd be preparing food for them. And I used to think, what's going on behind those screens? I was really interested. So after a couple of years, I started to get a bit fed up with kitchen work because it's hard work and it doesn't pay very well. And I thought I'd do an access course. So I did an access course at my local college. Did really well. They said, you should go to university. Most of the people on the course were just there for something to do. They were really lovely people. It was a really great year. And I think I was only one of possibly 3 people who actually went on to go to university. I went to university, did sociology at Sheffield Hallam University. And it was quite clear early on that nobody or hardly anyone on the course was really interested in doing research. And I was like, wow, this is great. There's going to be a job at the end of it. And it was something I was really interested in. So I took all of the research modules, learnt a lot about research, and then applied for a job in London and got it, and which was amazing. I started as a research officer for the National Association of Pension Funds. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I went back and did a master's course. And then I did various other things. So I've got kind of my and then things got a bit complicated. So I've got a CV here. This is my kind of standard CV that I kind of like send out. I've probably got to update it quite soon because it makes it look like I've been drifting for about 20 years, which possibly is true. But But so I had a great time in London. Actually, on the strength of that job, got offered to do a PhD at Oxford University. But I was very ambivalent about it. I wasn't ready for a PhD. I'd got the master's. I went away to do a master's. And then I've got a bit of animation. Had a bit of a crisis in the extended family. Gave me the chance not to do the PhD. I ended up moving back up north. Got a couple of jobs. Started working in academia. Then came to Leeds, so I moved to Leeds, worked for a charity for a year, but it was a tiny charity and there wasn't really much space. So I applied for a job at University of Leeds, got it, and spent the next 6-7 years as a kind of criminological researcher in the law school at the University of Leeds. It was great, it was an amazing job. I spent a lot of time traipsing around the country, talking to homeless people, drug users, all sorts of really interesting people, and it gave me real insight into kind of different methods of research. I did qualitative research, quantitative research, all the stuff I'd learned to do at university. Then I was offered a chance to do a PhD. I had about 3 months to think about what to do. I got an ESRC-funded PhD. I decided to look at knife crime, why young people were carrying knives. Because there was a kind of gap in the research at the time that everyone was talking about it, but nobody knew why it was happening. So I thought, brilliant. Then I had another kind of family crisis. My father died. So it kind of like it was a bit of a wobble. Just kind of like at the time I should really been focusing more on my career. And then just as I started my PhD, I fell in love. Met my wife, who had just finished her PhD and did it in half the time it took me to do my PhD. And then I became a stepfather and also a father. My daughter was born. Just as I was starting my PhD, my supervisor was not happy about that. And it took me like 6 years to finish my PhD, partly because I had a lot more fun bringing up a little girl than I did traipsing around talking to young people involved in knife crime and then reading about it and writing up about it. Being a dad was a lot more fun, I have to say. So I eventually finished my PhD. And then at the same time I was working whilst doing my PhD as well in the kind of the student development and staff development. I spent about 4 years seeing how they developed staff and running training courses basically. And then, let me go on a bit. And then I applied for a kind of a research job, probably lower than my experience because I wanted to get back into doing research again. I started at Manchester Metropolitan University and I was miserable. I had to get the train 2 or 3 times a week to Manchester. It was soul destroying. That was pre-COVID. So basically, 2019, I was absolutely depressed, really fed up. My research career didn't feel like it was going anywhere. I had to get the train 3 times a week to Manchester, which was not fun and still isn't fun. And it was a pretty miserable time, actually. And I know of lots of other people in research who have also hit these kind of low points. So I think it's important sometimes to talk about this because one of the things with doing research is we do it because we care about other people in the world. But within research, we don't always talk about our own lives and the complexities of our own lives. So it's not always the most supportive environment in some ways because we're all focused on trying to fix the world and we forget to fix ourselves sometimes. So what happened after that was COVID. I had my contract cancelled. The university decided to cancel all short-term contracts. I was just up for promotion at the time. I was really pushing for promotion. And then I got the phone call that we're cancelling anyone who's on a short-term contract gets cancelled. So I was redundant and again, fed up. But this time I had no money as well. So I was fed up and very poor. I was lucky that my wife continued to work through COVID. And then I thought about it and actually I realised it was an opportunity. And then sorry to say, it was a really terrible time, COVID. A lot of people really suffered, including people that I knew really suffered. But I actually had a fantastic time. It gave me the chance to have a break from research, gave me the chance to rethink who I was as a person. I did loads of different things. I online tutored PhD students and master's students, and did kind of copy editing and proofreading, especially for students whose language, English wasn't the first language. I spent a lot of time helping people to formulate their thoughts in English. I worked as chief editor for an online digital arts magazine that was around promoting young women in the arts. I homeschooled my daughter, which was probably the best thing I've ever done and the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. I studied mindfulness and became a mindfulness coach. Kind of decided not to pursue it because it's really hard work. I had some coaching, online coaching. I wrote quite a lot, and I just chilled out and got fit and healthy, which I hadn't had a chance to do. Doing a PhD kind of like really takes over your life, or really took over my life, and kind of neglected myself a bit. So it gave me the chance just to chill out for a bit and have a nice time, watch a bit of TV, catch up with old friends, online, of course, not in person. So yeah, it was a real opportunity for me. By 2021, I was like a different person. I was a lot happier and feeling like kind of refreshed and really reinvigorated. So that's the first part of the presentation. Actually, no, it's not quite. Then this was when my second part of my research career started. I went back to MMU, got a promotion I was hoping for in a different department, and worked part-time for a year on a fantastic project with an amazing team. But by that time, I decided it was time to get out of the university system anyway. So I was really focused on what else to do and had a plan, and I'd had some coaching, started applying for jobs. And I got one, and I started work where I am now, the research manager at Youth Futures Foundation, just over a year ago now. So I kind of like, for the first time in a long time, I'd formulated a plan, executed it, and it was actually starting to work. So that's where I am now. What have I got to reflect on? Oh, actually, the future. Not sure where the future holds, but I've got a plan. That's all you need to know. So, okay, reflections. This is a little bit of animation here. What have I learned in 20 years of largely horizontal movements whilst developing other people, helping students, and being a researcher myself? One, you are not your research career. There's a lot more to you than your career. And it's really important to think about that, because we all want to improve the world. But as I've said already, you've also got to think about yourself. And research can sometimes be all-encompassing, and you got to put yourself first, basically. You got to think about your long-term direction as well, because, sorry to say, not many other people will. Research is a very busy thing, and even the most supportive people you will encounter in the research field will have limited time to help you develop yourself. There's a few of them, and I've been lucky enough to have some of those people in my life, but there's not many. Most people are too busy on their own career. And I'd love to say we could all become more supportive, and I really try to be supportive, but a lot of people won't be. So you've got to think about yourself, really. Expect life to get in the way. We all know that anyway. That's certainly what happened to me. Understand and develop transferable skills, because there's a lot of different directions in research. You might reach a point where you don't want to do research anymore, or you need a break. I've done a couple of diplomas. I did a diploma in proofreading towards the end of my PhD, just to give me a bit of a break. And it was great. It really served me in that I did that during COVID and actually made a bit of money during my PhD on the side as well. So have some kind of like alternative plan B and plan C if you've got a bit of time. Develop your skills. Change is okay. If you're not happy, step out, take a break, or do something completely different. Try new things. I won't labour on that for now. Number 2, prioritise yourself. I'm going to repeat myself deliberately. Think about your long-term direction, because nobody else will. And to be really hard-nosed here is probably the most hard-nosed bit of the whole thing. What I would say is, if you're in a research job and your line manager within 3 months hasn't discussed what you're going to do next, then think about a different job. because you should expect the people you're working with to want to develop you in your career. But there will be places you may work where that will not happen. And it's up to you there to think about, do you want to work somewhere else where there's more supportive community, and find that supportive community, basically. Don't get stuck somewhere where the hard work you do isn't really appreciated and people are too busy to think about, especially a line manager, think about where you're going next, basically. And that's what I say. I line managed somebody, and as soon as she started, I was like, we're probably going to be in this relationship for 2 years. I might get promoted, but I expect you to get promoted. I might move to a different place. You might move to a different place. But don't get too comfortable. Enjoy the work, but think about where you're going next. And that's what I tell everybody I work with, basically. Do your job, but think every day about what you want to do next. How can you develop and expand? Learn to say no. You've got to be a bit selfish sometimes. It's definitely what I've learned. It's easy to take everything on and end up with far too much work to do. Take care of your mental and physical health. Pretty much every day, think about that, is what I would say. It's all very well trying to make a better world, but you gotta keep healthy as well. And plan for your future financial well-being. This is something really important because there's a lot of short-term contracts in research. And I'm so glad my first research job was in the pensions industry. So I was thinking about this, because if I add up all the different pension pots I've got from the different research jobs, it doesn't add up to too much, really. Thankfully, because I worked in the pensions industry, I started putting a bit aside and having a private pension as well. Because it's 20, 30, 40 years when you retire. If you look back and you've just got 20 years of kind of like contract work, you might be a little bit short on money. So think about that from day one. Think about it when you go home today. That's the thing, really. Own your own background. I've heard a lot from my amazing fellow presenters about different backgrounds, and kind of own it. You're going into a space where everyone comes from different places and different backgrounds. And I think it's important to own your own, because it can kind of help you think of your direction. So where I am now, I'm helping to improve when young people come out of school and they haven't got a clue what to do, which was me not that long ago. Now I'm in that space where actually that's really important. Maybe if young people knew what they could do when they came out of school, the world would be a better place. And I feel that I can inform that from my own personal background, really. I'm nearly finished now. We're running out of time. Okay. Be proud of your education. I went to Sheffield Hallam. It's a fantastic university and I had an amazing degree. But you will sometimes encounter people who are a little bit sniffy about going to one of the new universities. Funnily enough, it's often not the people who went to Oxbridge, who on the whole have been super supportive of me and really encouraging. But you meet people who maybe you went to the universities in the middle ground. Some of them are amazing. Other people, they're like, oh, you went to ex-Polytechnic, did you? Well, that's a bit rubbish. You can't have learned as much. And I was like, I'm always like, no, I went to a fantastic university. So really own that. Think about your skill set. As I've said, keep developing your skills. We've talked about the different research methodologies. It's evolving all the time. Keep on top of all those evolutions. Learn about evaluation. Learn about mega studies. Learn, if you're interested in quant data, all the interesting things that discussions are being had around powers and the statistical significance and things that are changing all the time. I'll go a bit quicker. In fact, I've said that already. Big thing, academia is not for everyone, as I discovered. People are really focused and have a kind of like really love to write or teach. If you're more versatile, then it's a good start, but look elsewhere, I would say. Think very carefully before doing a master's or PhD. I've coached and mentored a lot of PhD students. It's really hard work. You've got to know why you're doing it before you do it. Don't just fall into a PhD. It can be really tough. And if you fall into a PhD, you might not know what to do with it at the end of it, should you get through. And increasingly, the figures, I would say go and look for them yourself, but the amount of people who do a PhD compared to the amount of people who become, say, professors is tiny. So just think about what you want out of a PhD. If you want to learn stuff and methodology, great. If you want to become a professor, maybe not so great. Methods are constantly evolving. That's the most fascinating part of my job. And I think everybody said that. It's such an enriching and interesting field to work in. Keep on top of things. There's so much out there. Very quickly, there's loads of different research career routes. Academia and academic adjacent is interesting if you enjoy working in universities. It kind of support academic research. Government research is amazing. And I've done a lot of work with government researchers, and they're so innovative. Ministry of Justice, for instance, has all this kind of like, it's doing amazing things around tech. Local government, charitable public sector. What works is having a moment. Evaluation is fantastic. When you get home, Google evaluation. There's so much out there, and there's a real skills gap. Whenever they advertise evaluation jobs, they get much less people applying than they do for research jobs, because nobody quite knows what evaluation is yet. So go and find out. And then there's the private sector, which is also really great. Just about finished. I think we've had enough advice on networking. I'm rubbish at networking, so I was going to say I can't give you advice on that. But get visible, find out what you're interested in, keep upgrading and keep your options open. And that's about it, really. I just wanted to finish on this is not a TED Talk. It's not designed to be inspirational, but I read this quote every day, and I find it really, we want to make the world a better place, but at the same time, it's about enjoying the journey. So I'm not going to read that out, but have a read of it. It's a lovely quote.